Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you recall, the last time, I'm sorry, my audio is probably peaking so bad. If you recall, the last time I made a YouTube video, you might recall, I said that I was going to start a SpongeBob podcast, and I did that because I am a man of my word most of the time. It is a wonderful podcast. It's called Absorbent and Yellow, SpongeBob, a deep dive, and it is just a fantastic, beautiful thing to discuss with your mother over dinner. I'm not talking for me. I'm saying for you. It's been a while since you called her, and I think that the right next step would be to subscribe to Absorbent and Yellow on all podcasting apps. No, but actually though, I'm posting this video not because how do I put this? So I started the podcast because I just wanted some creative outlet to put down on paper, so to speak, my love for SpongeBob and why specifically the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob SquarePants are spectacular, perfect in every way. In addition to that, I just needed something creative to do to take my mind off of how horrible the year 2020 is. And it's doing exactly that. And as always, I don't really care if people listen to it. I told you in the last video, I don't care, and I still don't care. It's achieving all of its goals for me. But it is very cool that people are listening to it, and I'm very, very flattered. And I thought that my YouTube compatriots would like to be let in on the party. So what I'm going to do is I'm posting here just the first episode of Absorbent and Yellow. I'm very, very proud of it. It's only gotten better since, but this episode I think is a great example of when I host an episode solo and the kind of behind the scenes and history making of SpongeBob that I get into, as well as my commentary on what makes these episodes so great. In a week or two, I'll post another video that I think is an excellent example of when I have a co-host on, when I have a guest on, discussing an episode. So that's basically it. You know me, you know that I don't really care if you like or subscribe, though I would love for you to. So give it a listen. I think that you will like it. If you do like it, please subscribe to the podcast. Don't worry, though. This is not the only thing that I'm going to be uploading for the rest of 2020. Not to tease it too much, but I have another video that I want to produce before the year is out. That is going to take quite a bit of effort on my part because I want a lot of people to watch it because I have a Nickelodeon related mystery that I need help solving. So look forward to that. Absorbent in Yellow. Please subscribe. Let's listen. Come on, join me, kids. You know what? I was going to say I'm going to let you listen. Let's listen together. Tell you what, I'll sit right here and listen with you to episode 1 of Absorbent and Yellow, a SpongeBob, a deep dive. Am I in focus? Good morning, Krusty Crew, and welcome to Absorbent and Yellow, the podcast where I and my friends talk about the making of and our admiration for
SpongeBob SquarePants.
You just heard the original introduction for the pilot of SpongeBob SquarePants as it aired on May 1st, 1999. If you can picture it in your mind's eye, the year is 1999. Rosie O'Donnell is hosting the Kids' Choice Awards for some reason. Britney Spears has just performed not too long ago. They're closing out the show with comedy act Kenan Thompson. And at the very end of the show, your favorite WWE wrestler Randy Savage gets slimed. It's the best night of your life, and they announced that following the award show right afterwards will be a sneak peek of the latest Nicktoon, SpongeBob SquarePants. That was 1999 when the pilot first aired, but to talk about where SpongeBob came from, we have to go back even further. And let me just say before we even get into this, there is so much, not just information on the making of SpongeBob SquarePants, but so much fascinating information on the backstory of the different creators, of SpongeBob himself, of Steven Hillenburg, the creator. I'm not going to be able to include all of that in this podcast episode, but I'm getting most of my information from an awesome resource titled An Oral History of SpongeBob SquarePants. You can find it online for free, or you can buy it on Kindle for 99 cents. I highly recommend it. But to give a brief history of the making of SpongeBob SquarePants, we have to go back all the way to the late 1980s to Humboldt State University in California, where Steven Hillenburg has just graduated college and shortly after gets a job as a marine biology teacher in California. I know that it just seems too good to be real, but that actually was his job, teaching kids about marine biology, specifically pool tide creatures, animals, fish, teaching them about marine biology. And during his time as a marine biology teacher, he always had a passion for art, and part of the way that he taught kids about marine biology was by creating a comic strip titled The Intertidal Zone, which was quote unquote co-hosted by a character that he had made up named Bob the Sponge. At the time, Bob the Sponge just looked like a blobby actual sea sponge. Steven Hillenburg does that for about 3 years and enjoys it, but realizes during that time that his life calling is probably actually more related to the arts. He goes back to school in 1989 to Cal Arts in California for animation, does a few short animated shorts after graduating. In that time, meets Joe Murray, who later goes on to create the cartoon Rocko's Modern Life on Nickelodeon, and gets a job working with him. On the show Rocko's Modern Life, Steven Hillenburg is known by everyone as just a beast of the workforce. He has incredible work ethic and is just immediately entrusted with so much responsibility, up to the point that at the fourth and final season of Rocko's Modern Life, the series creator Joe Murray steps down and Steven Hillenburg becomes the creative director of the fourth and final season of Rocko's Modern Life. During this time, he's making tons of connections, many of which you'll clearly see on SpongeBob, be it voice actors, storyboard artists, even sound effects. And while this idea of a dorky, innocent, childlike sponge character has kind of been, bubbling up in his mind for years now, it's in 1994 that he gets really specifically the idea for a cartoon that he wants to make, which at that time was titled SpongeBob Ahoy. So he starts developing this in 1996 when Rocko's Modern Life gets canceled. He goes all in on developing a series pitch for SpongeBob Ahoy. And then as fate would have it, he gives his series pitch in 1997. His co-creators recount stories of how he just absolutely knocks it out of the park, pitching the show to Nickelodeon executives. He comes into the office room wearing a Hawaiian print shirt. He's got a seashell that when you hold it up to your ear, it's playing Hawaiian music. And then he's got a full aquarium set, which he has filled with small models of the setting of Bikini Bottom and each of the characters. He has full backstories on each character and then a run through of the pilot. The entire boardroom is dying laughing the entire time. They tell him, just give us a minute. We just want to talk about this quick. They leave the room. He expects that they're going to come back in and say, we're going to fly to New York. We'll give you an answer in 2 weeks. They end up, as fate would have it, coming back into the room and telling him, we're sold. We want the show. And the rest is history. The cool thing about the way that it sounds like Steven Hillenburg worked and the way that he led his co-creators to work on the show, even at this point of pitching the show, so much of SpongeBob SquarePants or SpongeBob Ahoy has been fleshed out in his mind so that he knows exactly what he's pitching to them. And as soon as they start making the show, they have so much foundation to build upon. He has detailed out everything about the characters, all of their character traits. Everything that they write in the first few episodes isn't just them like coming up with it on the spot. He's already thought through like, this is SpongeBob, this is what he's like, this is how he would react in these different situations. This is Patrick, this is why he's the way that he is. Like the most specific things, like he's already thought through all of this. So much so that the voice actor of SpongeBob, Tom Kenny, recounts that he came into his audition. They had notes for him. They had all these notes on SpongeBob's personality. They had some idea of like, it's going to be like a combination of this character and this character. And so he's trying out different voices and he goes through a few, and they get to a point where Tom Kenny is doing this certain voice and Steven Hillenburg says like, that's enough. That's perfect. That we found SpongeBob. That's SpongeBob. And he tells the executives like, I don't want to audition anybody else. Tom Kenny is SpongeBob. It's perfect. And the executives, of course, are like, well, we're used to auditioning like 100 or 200 different people. Could we audition like at least a few more? And Steven Hillenburg is like, no, I know my characters. I know SpongeBob. This is perfect. That's just one example of like the kind of creative integrity that he led with throughout the creation of the show. And so the pilot is greenlit and they're off to the races writing the first episode. They originally are going to do a story that is kind of a road trip with SpongeBob and Squidward. They end up throwing out the idea because they felt like it wasn't working for the pilot. And funnily enough, that idea would later be picked up later in season 1. We all now know it as the famous Krusty Krab pizza episode. So they pivot and they come up with this idea about SpongeBob applying for a job at a fast food restaurant. One of the creators says that the idea was actually based on Steven Hillenburg's childhood growing up as a Boy Scout. And they start crafting together just this perfect story that is so like perfectly going to communicate SpongeBob's enthusiasm, his optimism, his energy, give like an idea of the feel of the show. It's not cynical. It's not cool. But it's just like overly optimistic and fun and weird. But the coolest thing I think about the creation of the pilot of SpongeBob SquarePants, I forgot to mention, as it turns out, there's a mop in like Norway or something called the Sponge Boy. And so Nickelodeon nixed that and they had to change the name. So they went with SpongeBob SquarePants. Anyway, the coolest thing I think about the creation of the pilot of SpongeBob SquarePants is this. This is a quote from Jay Lender in the oral history of SpongeBob SquarePants. He says, the creative process was really exciting. We weren't thinking we're creating something that's going to be worth $1 bazillion because none of us cared about that. Steve didn't care and still doesn't care about that, but it was intoxicating. And I just wanted to be on this team that's creating this cool idea. And I think that you can see that all throughout, not just the pilot, but the full like first 3 seasons that Steven Hillenburg is running. It's not about the money. It's not about the merchandise, even if that's, what like the Nickelodeon execs care about. They just care so much about the creative process and just having fun. Now, did they want it to be successful? I'm sure that they did. I'm sure that they cared about that. But you can just tell that like this pilot episode is just such a passion project of Steven Hillenburg's and like the accumulation of like a decade plus of just creativity and thinking about art and marine biology and everything in between. And this is why I love SpongeBob so much. This is one of the things that I geek out about a ton in general, but specifically about SpongeBob, is that we get to just enjoy the fruits of somebody else just like having fun, geeking out, just pouring their heart out on the page in a just like incredibly well-made piece of art. So we're going to have like a ton more about the making of the show in future weeks on different episodes. But for now, let's get into the pilot episode, Help Wanted.
And we're coming at you live from the Kids' Choice Awards after show party.
Okay, the awards just
be hanging out with all the stars. But coming up next is the premiere of Nickelodeon's newest Nicktoon, SpongeBob SquarePants. It's the premiere, so you better go check that out.
Ah, the sea. So fascinating. So wonderful. Here we see Bikini Bottom, teeming with life. Home of one of my favorite creatures, SpongeBob SquarePants. Yes, of course he lives in a pineapple, you silly.
And so we open the first episode with a wide shot of the whimsical world, underwater world of Bikini Bottom. So to start, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I just assumed that French accents were funny, and that's why there is a French narrator in SpongeBob SquarePants. It wasn't until I took French in high school that I learned that this is actually an extremely deep cut, nerdy reference. Jacques Cousteau, perhaps you've heard of him, was a French naval officer, explorer, conservationist, filmmaker, innovator, scientist, photographer, etc., etc. Basically, he was a marine biologist, a French one, who made documentaries about the ocean. You have to just hear what his like natural narration voice sounded like. So I'm going to put a clip in here.
With horns stretched forward, the perfectly streamlined manta easily outswims Philippe, who attempts to follow with camera.
And so, yeah, you can see it's like, I don't know. I just appreciate it so much more. Tom Kenny nails that voice, and the narrator is that much more funny on SpongeBob to me now. Something I noticed in this episode, rewatching it, is just how many references to this first episode there are in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. I cannot wait to talk about that on the podcast. It's obviously going to be a long time from now, but the more I watch these like early seasons and read about the creation of the show, the more I get like so giddy and excited to see like the culmination of all of that creative work. But so we open the episode. Jacques Cousteau narrates to us about Bikini Bottom. He says, of course, he lives in a pineapple city, silly, which is just like weird and funny to me. This like tugboat horn alarm clock is so freaking funny. It's so freaking loud. The music is just wonderful and so like happy, and just sets the tune, the tone so well right away. And the animation is so funny. I realized like watching through this first episode again, especially like thinking through like what I'm going to talk about on, in a completely audio based podcast, how much of this show is visual, how much of the jokes I laugh at are just like visual jokes right away. Like SpongeBob, go back and watch it. SpongeBob's little like crab walk that he does on the floor is so freaking funny. Anyway, the episode opens up. SpongeBob works out with his stuffed animal dumbbells, and he is ready to go start his first day as a fry cook at the Krusty Krab.
I'm ready! I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Go, SpongeBob!
So SpongeBob arrives to the Krusty Krab. He ogles at its beauty, and then suddenly decides that he is not ready and not deserving, and chickens out and goes to turn around. Something that I love about this scene is how quickly they are just like nailing the character and motivation of these different characters. So this scene specifically, I think, just like perfectly displays for us who SpongeBob and Patrick are. First of all, SpongeBob, like, you take it for granted now, but it's hilarious that he like so badly wants to be a fry cook at a fast food restaurant. I worked at a restaurant for 3 years of my life in the kitchen, and that is a grueling job. I worked with a lot of Squidwards, and I wish I could say that I was a SpongeBob. I think that I was mostly Chipper. I don't think that I was as good at my job as SpongeBob was, but it's just like especially if you've worked inside of a kitchen, which Steven Hillenburg, of course, had. It's just so funny that he wants to be a fry cook so badly. But not only that, but like this. I just need to park the car and say, like, I'm gonna sound so like up my own ego talking about this, like I'm talking about like Shakespeare or something. But stick with me. I mean, why do you care? You're listening to a SpongeBob podcast. This shows us like so quickly like the depth of SpongeBob's character, because he's so optimistic and he's so like energetic, but he's not like egotistical, because he's oddly like incredibly insecure. It's like really interesting because on one hand, like he doesn't care what other people think of him, but on the other hand, like it's not because he thinks that he's incredible. And I think that you see that in this episode. You're going to see it in part C of episode 1. His like insecurity about being a failure. But then not only that, but it just so like perfectly sets up Patrick as SpongeBob's hype man, his best friend, also like a stupid oaf, and yet like weirdly more of an adult than SpongeBob. And so SpongeBob chickens out, turns around, and then Patrick gives him this hype up speech.
Whose first words were, "May I take your order?"
Mine were.
Who made a spatula out of toothpicks and woodchop?
I did.
Who's a big yellow cube with holes?
I am.
Who's ready?
I'm ready.
Who's ready?
I'm ready.
Who's ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
The voice actor that plays Patrick, Bill, this is going to take some exercise to say correctly, Bill Fagerbaki, does not get enough credit for how funny he can just sound stupid as Patrick. We are next introduced to Squidward Tentacles, SpongeBob's neighbor who can't stand SpongeBob. I love Roger Bumpus's performance of Squidward. I think it's like perfect. And I also just absolutely love Hillenburg's attention to detail of Squidward and Mr. Krabs' footsteps that you can hear in the background.
Mr. Krabs! Hurry, Mr. Krabs, before it's too late. I gotta tell you about this.
Permission to come aboard, Captain.
And I love Clancy Brown's performance as Mr. Krabs. He just feels like on a whole nother level on this show. I love how many like sea shanty references he makes. I love that he calls SpongeBob Sponge Boy Me Bob. And I like Squidward. I love that his feet sound different than everybody else's. And so SpongeBob asks Mr. Krabs for a job, tells him that Squidward will put in a good word for him, which Squidward, of course, says no. And Mr. Krabs comes up with a plan to get rid of SpongeBob, tells him to go find at the store a hydrodynamic spatula with port starboard attachments and turbo drive. SpongeBob, of course, is glad to go do that. And I absolutely love the shot of Mr. Krabs putting the hat on SpongeBob's head. SpongeBob is just so freaking happy to be wearing that Krusty Krab hat. And here, when SpongeBob goes to the store to get the spatula, we get a scene that, if you're like me, I know that you know this scene, but I know that you forgot that this scene was in this episode. And that is, of course, Mr. Krabs describing that smelly smell.
Do you smell it? That smell. The kind of smelly smell. A smelly smell that smells smelly. Anchovies.
This is what is crazy about SpongeBob. When you grow up on it and you just like feel like, oh, I watched SpongeBob growing up for like 5 or 6 years, you know, and then you realize that everything that you know and that you quote comes from the first 3 seasons. You realize like how much content is packed into like so little time. And so like I keep having these moments watching these first few episodes, such as this one, where I'm like, I knew that scene. I knew like that it was probably from early in the show, but like I had absolutely no idea. Like that is literally from the first episode. Same thing with the next episode, well, episode C, like Sandy showing up like that quickly in the show. I don't know. As we keep going through the show and through these, especially these first, like, I don't know, dozen episodes, I guarantee that you're going to have more moments like that with me where you're like, holy crap, that was in that episode. That was that early on. Like, I know that line, but I don't remember like the actual context of it. And I think that it's going to be very bittersweet for you and me both, the listener, to realize like how few episodes of SpongeBob there are, or at least of these, or the original 3 seasons. So the episode goes on. We get an onslaught of what I assume are tourist anchovies invade the Krusty Krab. There's too many of them. They can't handle them. We get a lot of ocean jokes from Mr. Krabs. And when all hope seems lost, we hear this voice break through the chaos.
Permission to come aboard, Captain. Did someone order a spatula? That's right. 1 hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments. And let's not forget the turbo drive. Would you believe they only had 1 in stock? To the kitchen!
I absolutely love the weird random decision to have Tiny Tim play to close out this episode. The visuals, like I said, like my words can't do it justice. This last like segment is just like an example of how funny the animation is. SpongeBob dancing on different color backgrounds and then dancing on a yellow background so that all you can see is his smile and eyes and like his like hands and feet is so freaking funny. I have never come up with anything funnier than that joke. So SpongeBob saves the day. He gets a job at the Krusty Krab, much to the behest of Squidward, and the episode closes out with a funny joke about Patrick coming in and ordering a Krabby Patty and SpongeBob just going berserk. So that's the first episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. I was honestly like surprised at how funny this episode is. Like I really expected it to be like, I don't know, like my favorite SpongeBob is definitely late season 2 or season 3, but this is just like so tight and just like so well packs into it in just like 8 minutes who the characters are, what the tone of the episode is. Is it like the funniest episode? Is it the best episode? I don't know, probably not. But it's weird and it's ambitious and like it's just like perfect.
What would you like to order, Patrick?
1 Krabby Patty, please.
So those are my thoughts on the pilot episode, Help Wanted. So with that, let's move on to the next episode, Reef Blower. Reef Blower is interesting because I always felt growing up like it felt like out of place, and I could never put together like why there is a completely silent SpongeBob episode, and why it's so short. And it's super obvious to me now. I feel kind of stupid not even realizing it until now, but it's definitely because the first pilot episode is only 8 minutes long, and as you may or may not know, cartoons need to fill out an 11-minute slot, either with just one self-contained 11-minute episode or at least half of a 22-minute episode before the ad break. But this episode is still funny. I appreciate it a lot more after rewatching it. Immediately, I think that Reef Blower looks like season 1. I mean, like, obviously, if you looked at the pilot and you had to guess which season it is, it's clearly season 1. But just even, like, the way that the characters are colored, how they feel like a little bit more tight designs, you can tell that this was made after the show got picked up. I laughed out loud at seeing SpongeBob in his window. Like I said, the show is so visual. Obviously, this episode is, like, only visuals. Super interesting to establish in your second episode the dynamic of Squidward and SpongeBob being neighbors. Beyond that, there's not a ton to say about this episode. Just a couple quick notes. The animation is just like so delightful. I laughed out loud at like that womp noise with the zoom in on the leaf. That was really, really funny. And yeah, I smiled like the whole way through this. It's just like so silly. We get a glimpse of boats being used for cars in this, and the background fish. The ending is super silly, super weird that he vacuums up the entire ocean. But I don't know. There's not much more to say other than just like awesome, short, cute little episode. A year or two ago, someone on the internet made a GIF version of this episode. So I don't know. Maybe look at my Twitter or text me, and I'll send you the entire 4-minute episode as a silent GIF. It's a good episode. Let's move on.
Where have I seen this before?
And last but not least is Tea at the Tree Dome. This episode is awesome. It introduces Sandy Cheeks. SpongeBob calls her the land squirrel. I love that this episode opens with jellyfishing. Again, I had no idea that jellyfishing is introduced right away in episode 1. And it's also just interesting seeing like details that I feel like the show got a little bit away from. They come back to jellyfishing later on, but like specifically that SpongeBob always jellyfishes with these like nerd glasses on. I'm not sure if they were just trying to communicate that like SpongeBob is a nerd or what here. I love his delivery of these lines. I'll just let you listen to them here.
Sorry, old clam. Y'all need to learn some manners. You're about as ugly as homemade soup.
Hooray, land squirrel!
Hooray, land squirrel. Like you hear that like almost like mid-Atlantic accent there. I don't know what Tom Kenny was doing there, but I love it. I love this episode because SpongeBob is so out of his element in this episode. First, by just like not being good at karate, which again, they introduced first episode that SpongeBob loves karate, that Sandy loves karate. They pack in so much right away. You can just tell that Steven Hillenburg has like thought through everything about these characters, and so he doesn't have to come up with stuff on the spot, but he's just like waiting to reveal everything that he's already decided about these characters to us. But anyway, I love this episode because SpongeBob is out of his element. Like the first episode, you just see him like exceedingly good at the thing that he loves. And in this one, he's so like in over his head. And I think that this is like a good example early on of how like Tom Kenny describes SpongeBob as like not really a kid, but not really an adult. And that's something that I loved about SpongeBob growing up, is that he clearly has the energy of a kid, right? But he's not a kid in the sense of like Timmy Turner or Tommy Pickles or whatever. And existing in that space lets him talk about like not kid things with Patrick, not like adult or crude things or whatever, but even just like being fancy in this episode, as they'll later talk about, stuff like that, or just having like in later seasons really adult sounding conversations about being a man and stuff. He's able to do because he exists in this like ambiguous space between like being a child and being an adult that lives on his own and works a 9-to-5 job. So SpongeBob is introduced to Sandy and they hit it off right away. I love this clip because this is me trying to force friendship with anyone that I don't actually have that much in common with.
I like you, SpongeBob. Well, we could be tighter than bark on a tree. Hey!
I like you too, Sandy. Hey, yup! Oh, say, what is that thing on your head?
Well, that's my air helmet.
May I try it on?
Heck no, I need it to breathe. I gotta have my air.
Me too. I love air. Air is good.
Air is good. I love that delivery. It's very George Costanza-esque, very Seinfeld-esque. I love air. Air is I breathe air all the time. So SpongeBob forces this friendship with Sandy. Clearly, they're going to be friends, but he feels the need to fake loving air. And how many of us have not done that? Substitute air with whatever, politics, late night news, country music, country music. That's all I got. So SpongeBob rushes back to Patrick after setting up a date with Sandy, not like a romantic date, which, by the way, I want to say, like, I can't tell. It seems at first like there's supposed to be like a romantic relationship building between SpongeBob and Sandy. I really don't think that it really like develops even within this episode, and they certainly drop it after that. And so I want to assume that there was never meant to be like a romantic relationship between them. Maybe Nickelodeon wanted that. I don't know. But anyway, so SpongeBob runs back to Patrick and asks him about air and what I think is one of the funniest, most underappreciated Patrick deliveries ever.
Patrick! 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 Patrick!
What's there?
Huh?
So Patrick explains to SpongeBob what air is.
I just met this girl. She wears a hat full of air.
Do you mean she puts on airs?
I guess so.
Again, Patrick being like the adult of the situation for some reason, because SpongeBob is just so loving and assumes the best of everyone. Only he could look up to Patrick like he actually understands how the world works. So Patrick tells SpongeBob all about putting on airs, fancy talk, and being fancy. And he goes to Sandy's under the pretense that he's going to be fancy and hold his pinky up the entire time. The water draining from like the hallway in Sandy's dome is so freaking funny, and SpongeBob flopping on the ground like a fish is so freaking funny. And again, here we are yet again. This scene, just like the smelly smell scene with Mr. Krabs, I did not think was this early in the show. SpongeBob does his iconic "I need water" voice. Me and my siblings growing up did this voice so often. I feel like I like killed my throat so many times trying to talk while breathing in. I do not know how Tom Kenny did that for so long, but SpongeBob, this is such a freaking funny line.
You know, you're the first sea critter to ever visit.
I can't imagine why.
Can I get you anything?
Water would be nice.
So we get another first, or at least what I think is the first. Maybe it happened in the last episode, but the first grotesque close-up as we see SpongeBob's eyes fully painted in full detail looking at the ice in Sandy's flower vase. And then next we get another iconic line, one that I've quoted so many times when I'm trying to convince myself when I want something that I don't need it.
I don't need it. I don't need it. I definitely don't need it. I 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 need it!
No, SpongeBob! No! Stop!
So funny. And that is like a perfect example of the patience that SpongeBob has to leave that beat there. In a lesser cartoon, it would just be like action, 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 like yelling, yelling, yelling. But they're like smart enough to know that like the buildup and then just dead silence and then SpongeBob breaking that is so funny. I feel like that has like influenced my humor. You can see the influence on like so many cartoons after this. Genius. So Patrick comes in, and I'm sorry I'm just playing you like audio clips, but I just need to appreciate the hilarious delivery of Patrick coughing.
What kind of place is this?
So that's pretty much the end of the episode. SpongeBob and Patrick freak out. They're trying to get out of Sandy's tree dome, which is very interesting. There's going to be a throwback to that in a later season. But Sandy comes out to find SpongeBob and Patrick are completely dried up. Also the first time that we see them as like a literal kitchen sponge and dried out starfish when they are out of water. They get water glass head bowls that they put tea in, and they relax with Sandy, and all is well. Kind of like I said with Help Wanted, is this the funniest episode? Is this the tightest episode? No, probably not. But there are like some like super memorable lines in this between I need it, what is air, and so on. I'm just very excited to watch the rest of SpongeBob now. They've so like well put together the characters and their like motivations and how they respond and react to each other in these first 3 episodes. Thanks for listening. This has been Absorbent and Yellow, a SpongeBob deep dive. I hope you enjoyed listening to my thoughts. I tried out just kind of speaking off the top of my head for this first episode. Next week, we're going to have a guest on to discuss episodes 2A and 2B, Bubble Stand and Ripped Pants. And so we'll try that out, a more conversational format. And then in the future, I'm going to try kind of writing out my thoughts as like almost a video essay, but just one that I'm talking. So bear with me as we're trying out different formats and stuff for the show. But thank you. You can write in to my home address if you find it. I don't have a clever close. Subscribe to the podcast, which you've already have done if you're listening to this. Goodbye.
Air is not good, Patrick. Air is not good.
Wow. That was an incredible podcast. I believe I will subscribe to it and leave a review on iTunes and every other podcasting service that I can think of. Thank you, Sam. That was awesome.